All right, so today in class we're going to do an I do, you do activity. I will be doing one, and then you're going to do the same type and give it a shot on your own. And in between, you pause while you do it, and then we go on to the next one. So let's get started with this first one. It says to solve by factoring. And I've got an equal sign right here, and I got both things on both sides. So we got to get everything on one side first. So my first step is to minus a 5x from this side. Now let's move it over to the other side. And obviously it goes with the 8x here, so that's a minus 5x under that one. And if you want to do it all in one step, I'm going to also take the 14, and the opposite of a positive 14 is a minus 14. And I will do the minus 14, obviously goes with the 26 on the other side. So then going down the middle here, basically I've done an I do, you do is the thing going here, and we got moving everything from one side to the other. So I've got an x squared that comes out of this. 8x and a minus 5x is a plus 3x. Then I've got, let's see here, a minus 26, and that's a minus 40. And that will all equal 0. Okay? Next up, since I've got it, I've got a trinomial sitting right in front of me there. I have no GCF that comes out of it, so if it's a trinomial, we do two sets of parentheses, and then that will equal 0. So we know x squared is x times x. Fix my little x there. I've got a minus 40 here, so this minus 40, once again, my factors of 40. 1 times 40, 2 times 20. Okay, 3 does not work. 4 times 10, 5 times 8, and then 6 and 7 don't work. I've got all my pairs. Well, I've got the boss sign right here. This boss sign tells me there's got to be a minus, so I automatically will bring this plus down here, and then this minus means I need a different sign. So the plus comes down, and that means I need the opposite sign here, which is a minus. Then I need, the boss tells me on that minus sign also that which pair of factors adds up to that middle 3 right there. So which, or not adds up to, subtracts, my bad. So obviously 5 and 8 subtract to it, and we put the bigger one first, the other one second. We have now completely factored. There's nothing else I can do in factoring, no dots sitting around or anything. So I will tee it up, and I get x plus 8 will equal 0. And I get an x minus 5 equals 0. So then I do the opposite of minus 8 to both sides here, and x turns out to be equal to negative 8. And on this side I add 5, and x turns out to be equal to 5. So you can circle your answers there like that, or once again you can put them in those French clearly braces saying, hey, negative 8's an answer, and 5 are answers. Those are my solutions to this. Obviously, you can go back and plug them in and check. That's where we're at. So that's the first one. Now I want you to pause the video, and you go do the next one. All right, hopefully you did all right on the other number 1 factoring. We're going to move on here now, and I'm going to do one with you. Completing the square is the way to do it. It says, same situation. I got stuff on both sides of this equal sign. So we're going to start working on this right away. First thing I would do, minus a 3x from both sides, and obviously that goes with the 5x. And I would do a minus 5 here as well. Minus 5 right there. What does that give me? Everything cancels on this side, so we're equal to 0. On this side, I've got an x squared, and then I've got the minus 3 and the minus 5, gives me minus 8x. And I got a 19 and a minus 5, and that gives me a plus 14. Okay, so if we're going to do completing the square, once again, we put our a and b terms here first. X squared minus 8x. Leave 2 blanks, and then the plus 14 equals 0. Okay. Then what I do is always I take half of that minus 8, so that's a minus 4 that I write down right here. And then I turn around and I square it. So remember that was half of that. And I turn around and I square it back up. Well, what's the square of negative 4? Positive 16. And then we have to do the opposite, a minus 16. That way we're adding a 0 net pair. Remember, all I do is take an x squared. This is just like if I had to factor these first 3 right here. If I change colors here, I'll go to red here. These first three have to get factored. You can factor them normally, but I have my little shortcut method there. And then these two go together right here. So I'm going to go back and change colors here. All right, so I got x minus 4 squared. Okay, meaning if I factored this thing right up here, this whole thing in this red, you would actually end up factoring it x minus 4, x minus 4. These two combined together are minus 16 and a plus 14, and that gives me a minus 2 equaling 0. Okay, now all I have to do is put an equals instead of 0 equals y, and you got that vertex form, remember, if you ever want to go and get the shifts and the vertex and all that stuff. But we're doing completing the square, so the next thing to do is to add 2 to both sides. All right, so then what I have here is the x minus 4 being squared equals 2, okay? And our next step is to take the square root, because we got the perfect square all by itself on one side, and then we do it the other side. Don't forget your plus or minus, plus and minus on the other side. So once I take the square roots of that stuff, then back to this, I will get an x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. I cannot break down the square root of 2. And your last step is to add 4 to both sides. So I add 4, bring it up here. Your answer really comes out that x is equal to positive 4 plus or minus square root of 2. And unless they tell you you have to go into the nearest tenth or anything like that or whatever, leave it that way. I can't break down the square root of 2 anymore. And 4 is fine. That's it. 4 is 4 plus square root of 2 and 4 minus. So that would be my answer unless they tell me otherwise. Okay? All right, your turn. I did one. Your turn to do number 2. And then pause the video and we'll come back and I'll do the next number 3 with you. Okay, so I'm back here. Number 3 now. We are going to solve this using the quadratic formula according to this. So I already wrote it off to the side. You guys are getting used to it. It's also on your reference table. Once again, this thing is not in the right form, so I am going to bring the 6x from the right side over to the left here, so minus 6x. I'm going to also bring over the minus 7, so the opposite is a plus 7. So we can get it all in the right form right here. Combine them, you get an x squared, and then we got a minus 11x, and then a plus 7 is a plus 11 equals 0. Now, if you remember, what's the key things we need here? We need our A, our B, and our C here. So our A is right here. That's equal to the 1 that's in front of the x squared, unwritten. The B here is a negative 11. And our C right there is a positive 11. So we're going to plug those into the formula, and we're going to solve. So I'm going to have x equals the negative of b, so the negative of a negative 11. Don't lose it. You're doing a negative of b, and b is a negative 11. Plus or minus the square root of a negative 11 being squared. Remember, if you're going to plug this in the calculator, don't forget to put the parentheses around that negative 11, or it will fail to square the negative sign. And then minus a 4 times a is a 1 times c is 11. And then we're going to take the square, divide that all, by 2 times a is 1. So I get x equals, the negative of negative 11 is a positive 11, plus or minus the square root of negative 11 squared is 121. And then 4 times 1 is 4 times 11 over here is 44, and it's all positive except for the one negative sign, so it's minus a 44. And then that whole thing is divided by 2. Okay, so then x equals, we're going to have 11 plus or minus the square root of, let's see here, you take 40 off of that, it's 80, 77. And then divided by 2. All right, so bottom line here is we have one answer where x is equal to 11 plus the square root of 77, which, guys, is just 711, so you can't break that up at all. and divide that answer in half. Or the other answer is x is equal to 11 minus the square root of 77. And then cut that in half. Now, this question did say, if you go back to the original here, it said go to the nearest tenth. So you have to use your calculator on this one. And if you plug it in, 11 plus the square root of 77, and you cut it in half, and you round that answer off, one answer turns out to be on that one. Let's see here. That turns out to be 9.9. And the other one, if I take 11 on the calculator and I do minus square root of 77, and I divide that by 2, it actually comes out to 1.1 to the nearest 10th. So those are your two answers for this one. And don't be afraid to use the calculator, okay? All right, I did one. Your turn to do number 3, and then pause the video while you do that, and come back, and we will do the last one together before you have your, I'll do one for you. Okay, we're back to the last one here, and this time we are going to solve this one in simplest radical form, quadratic formula. So another quadratic formula, but this time we will leave it in simplest radical form. So we'll have to remember how to break those down at the end. So I've already started this one. I moved the 5x, and the opposite is plus 5x to the other side. The minus 6 to the other side. Unfortunately, it looks like an equal sign. I apologize. You get this. So my a, what's in front of the x squared? Unwritten 1. My b is a positive 10. It should have been x there. So this is a 10. And my c is a negative 5 in this problem. Therefore, go right to the quadratic formula. The negative of b, so the negative of 10, plus or minus the square root of 10 being squared, that's the b squared, minus 4 times a is 1 times c is a negative 5. And that whole thing being divided by 2 times a, which is 1. So next line, I get a negative of 10 plus or minus the square root, once again, of 100 this time for 10 squared. And minus 4 times 1 times 5 is plus 20. All divided by 2 times 1. So I'm going to get x equals negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 120 divided by 2. Okay, as far as that one goes. Now we got to break up the square root of 120. Okay, lots of ways of doing that. Bring your things up here. Bottom line, I'm going to do x is negative 10 plus or minus. Now, for me, 120 is 4 times 30. So if I take a look at 4 times 30, I know that's a perfect square. 30 breaks up into, if you want 5 and 6, if you break that into 5 times 6, then the 6 is 2 and 3. So I don't get any more buddies or anything out of all that. So none of that works. So bottom line is I can pull out a 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So that comes out. The square root of 30 remains underneath. I can't really break that up anymore. And then I got to divide that whole answer by 2. So you got a couple ways of doing this. Once again, we've shown you in class. Bottom line is I take, I'll do a different color here. I divide this by 2 and this by 2. So if I do that right together, all I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, the answer is half of negative 10 is negative 5 plus or minus. 2 goes into this 2 right here. They cancel, so square root of 30. And there's your two answers. Negative 5 plus the square root of 30 and negative 5 minus. So bottom line, that's it. We've got our answer. I did one. Now it's your turn to do one, and you should be a pro at this stuff now.